Okay, listen up. This is First 5, where I look for games that respect your time and you can enjoy over a weekend. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm going to tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. Today's game is Metal Gear Survive. I'm probably almost alone in my fascination with Metal Gear Survive leading into its release. Between Kojima's terrible treatment, the completely generic idea to make a dime a dozen zombie survival game, the heavy use of assets from MGS5, and the fact that this game doesn't even remotely resemble anything the Metal Gear franchise stands for, there's not a whole lot of goodwill left to go around for this game. But the narrative itself is just so fascinating. Kojima breaks up with Konami after they treat him like shit, and the company suddenly cuts their hair and decides Metal Gear is gonna be a zombie survival game now? Konami's just chasing market trends, but for the franchise it's a leap that borders the surreal, and the fact that this game can exist is bizarre enough that I'm naturally curious. But in this case, staring openly at the total eclipse that is Metal Gear Survive actually did blind me. Most notably, the actual survival aspects don't mesh with the gameplay. This doesn't even feel like an entry in the survival genre. There's no sense of establishing a basic level of subsistence as you build your base. There's no clever managing of resources as you make the decision of whether to foray out for supplies or to try and push the main narrative forward. There's go here, grab a MacGuffin, and oh, by the way, don't forget to kill a goat and loot a few bottles of water along the way. My hunger and water levels weren't interesting survival mechanics that informed the activities I would do in the game next. They were ticking clocks for me to scramble to the next objective where there would be fresh water and maybe a few potatoes.
Thirst can lead to death.
And because this is a survival game, I spent most of my time running around with a spear made from a few random pipes instead of a gun, which is incredibly unfortunate because Metal Gear's melee combat is vastly less interesting than its gunplay. Why Konami thought sitting behind a fence stabbing enemies that passively stand there and let you hit them would be an interesting mechanic is beyond me. In any other game, this would be a dumb, boring exploit that people use to farm safely, but in Metal Gear Survive, this is your core combat mechanic. So combat's a bust, but stealth is still just as much fun as it was in MGS5. But once again, how incredibly unfortunate that combat is the objectively better option for multiple reasons. For one, you need a resource called Kuban to basically do anything. It's used for crafting, to level up, and to give you more air when you're in this weather phenomenon called the dust. And of course, the primary source of Kuban is killing zombies. In addition, a lot of resources require you to break something before you can take them, but this creates a lot of noise, which means you can either forego stealth or you can pass on vital supplies. The result is that killing everything in a mile radius is just vastly more rewarding than doing something actually interesting. Or at least that would be the complaint if I couldn't just go play a 20-minute multiplayer match and get quintuple the supplies and experience I got during the entire 4-ish hours I spent tooling around in the single-player campaign. Credit where credit is due, Metal Gear Survive's multiplayer is a lot more fun than its single-player experience. Combat suffers from a lot of the same issues, but when it's 4 people desperately scrambling around putting out fires without worrying about the survival part, it's a lot more fun. So, time for the verdict. This one really shouldn't be much of a shocker. There were brief flashes of entertainment, but by and large, I got nothing but disappointment from my experience with Metal Gear Survive, and based on that, I most certainly won't be playing it more. To be fair, there's nothing offensively wrong with Metal Gear Survive. It's just that this game is joyless, wholly unremarkable, underwhelming at every opportunity, tedious, boring, poorly balanced, flooded with pointless cutscenes, has a dizzyingly confusing UI, lacks a compelling core gameplay loop, and controls worse than a fish flopping around on land.
Keep an eye on the remaining oxygen.
The only enjoyable parts are holdovers from where you can still kind of see the bones of MGS5, but none of the new introductions to the formula make for a fun experience. They just overshadow it. Unfortunately, the only positive thing I can say is that Metal Gear Survive feels like a completed game, which to its credit is better than a lot of survival games can say for themselves. No janky bugs, no missing features that still need to be developed, and no fundamental problems like the game never getting finished and being stuck in perpetual early access. Despite annoyances like extra character slots being locked behind an additional paywall and in-game microtransactions, this is a complete and fully functional game. But let's be real, that is an incredibly low bar. And if this is as good as the survival genre can get when it receives that AAA treatment, I'm glad I got away from this genre years ago.
I detect that you're hungry.
Hey, I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode of First 5. Wait, hold up. I got one last really good clip that really exemplifies the joylessness of this game and how much it loves to waste your time. So here you go. These are the absolute final moments I spent with this game.
If the target dies, the mission will have been for nothing. Please consider the target's safety as well.
A half hour of progress lost because I tripped over a rock. Like and subscribe, everybody. See you next week.